Okay guys, in this video I want to share with you a JavaScript roadmap that will work for you if you're a complete beginner. So this is not for advanced people, but maybe if you're a bit more advanced, you might want to pay attention. You'll be learning a few things here and there. I'm 100% sure of that. I'm a firm believer that you have to be always a student and learn from beginners and from advanced people, because that's how you become exposed to all this, nuances, okay? Because life is not black and white, it's always like a shade of gray, and you have to be able to learn from everyone, okay? So this is gonna be a bit of a ranty video again, because I haven't planned this, okay? So I'm gonna speak freely, and I'm gonna have this Google Doc where I edit, and I'm gonna leave the steps for you. And I'm gonna leave it in the description of this video so you can make a copy, and then you can fill in the gaps with your own information, I guess, with your own resources, if you may. And maybe later I'm gonna open some sort of Discord community, and everyone can share their own roadmap, and then we can all create like a master roadmap, if that makes sense. So yeah, let's get started. Let's jump into my computer. If you're a complete newbie, one of the most important things for you to understand is first principles. First principles means what are things made of, or what is the purpose of a specific thing, okay? If you do not know why you're learning a specific thing, like no matter how hard you try, you won't be able to like understand the thing that you're trying to learn, okay? So JavaScript is pretty much the engine that allows us to create interactive websites and web apps. You will start off by understanding the basics of JavaScript as a programming language. Then you will start, making some websites interactive, like making things change colors when you click on them, like showing models and stuff like that. And then later you will be using JavaScript to create entire pages, you will ditch HTML, and probably you will be ditching CSS as well altogether. And you'll only be using JavaScript throughout your JavaScript developer career, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's get started. Now, JavaScript is built on a few pillars, like any programming language. It's nothing specific to JavaScript per se, but I want to give you these pillars, and then as we go in, I'm gonna expand on them so you can understand, what those pillars are doing. Okay, so the first pillar is your variables. The second one, in my opinion, is functions. Then we have conditionals. Conditionals, I would call them if-else statements, so like logic flow, if that makes sense. We also have some data types after the variables, and I would start just with the primitives, and I'm going to explain what those are in a second. Then after we learn these primitive data types, and after we learn if-else statements, I would suggest to you to look into non-primitives. I think that's how they're called, and loops. Okay, that's the last one. Okay, so these are the basics of any programming language, but besides these basics of a programming language, as I've told you, JavaScript is mainly created to make websites and web apps interactive. That means we need to look into DOM manipulation, DOM, document object model manipulation, and also event listeners. Okay, great. So these are the main pillars of JavaScript, okay, in my opinion. Again, in my opinion, as someone who's been doing JavaScript for a few years now, and someone that has been teaching JavaScript for a few years now, okay? So feel free to take that with a grain of salt, and always do your best judgment. Don't trust me at all. Always challenge my ideas and A/B test everything that I'm saying, because if you want to be smart, you cannot just trust people just like that, okay? So variables, data types, primitives, and here what you want to learn is numbers, strings, what else, booleans, null, undefined. I guess these are the ones that I care about. There are a few more. I think the other one is big int and there is another one. I think there are 7 in total, but I've never used those. So if I've never used something, I'm not going to tell you about it, okay? Because I don't know about it. So, you know, do your own research and figure out what are the other 2 that are missing from here. Okay, with functions, I'm going to tell you a few things that you need to pay attention as you are learning this stuff. As a beginner, you'll be making a big mistake when it comes to returning and console logging. So I'm going to type in return versus console log. So as a beginner, I've done this mistake, and I've seen a bunch of people in my program making this mistake. They think that if they console log something in their function, okay, that means that's what that function's output is. It's not true. So if you are learning functions right now, understand why you're messing up in your algorithms and whatnot. And if you're not learning functions yet, keep this in mind and remind yourself of this issue, okay? As you can see that I have like very specific things that I want you to know about. I'm not gonna tell you exactly like how a function is written. I'm not gonna show you like a syntax of a function and whatnot. It doesn't matter because you can learn that from other tutorial. But I'm showing you like things that people that are showing you tutorials online won't tell you because they haven't experienced, you know, teaching people, real people stuff, okay? So return versus console log is one thing. Then parameters and arguments. That's another important thing with functions. So parameters and arguments are basically the values that you are sending in a function. So imagine a function being some sort of like factory. It takes some sort of input, sometimes it doesn't. But whenever you give some input to a function like, hey, take these 2 numbers and then calculate them, we'll have some values that in your code, they will be defined like A and B, let's say. And you need to teach your brain to see those values A and B as some values that you'll be inserting later. So you kind of need to learn how to expect some values in one place without you seeing those values written down in there, okay? So you need to teach your brain to see those things, okay? And that's a very important thing. Another thing that I want to mention over here is that one exercise that you can try from day one, and I know it's pretty difficult, but this exercise is gonna pay attention, or is gonna pay dividends, sorry, is trying to understand what your code does, okay, before you run it and see what your code is actually doing. Why is that important? Well, if you just code, panic code, that's how I call it, for the sake of coding without understanding what your lines of code are doing, then you'll get stuck massively and then you'll have big difficulties learning. So with each line of code, try to do the computation of your code in your brain, okay, first of all, and then you run the code and see if what you were thinking about is the exact output of your code, okay? So I know this is very gigabrain and it's not hypey and whatever, but I'm telling you like things that I've seen working and things that I've seen beginners struggling with, okay? Now, let's go into if else. If else means if something is true, do this, else, if it's not true, do other things, right? So for example, if you're hungry, eat. Else, if you're not hungry, don't do anything, okay? If you are thirsty, drink. If you're not thirsty, don't drink, okay? If you clicked on this button and this button has color red, then make the color of the button blue. If the color of the button is blue, make the color of the button red. So a computer is extremely stupid, and you need to learn how to guide your computer to do different things. The computer is very smart, very, very fast, but very stupid. So keep that in mind. Okay, with DOM manipulation, what I need you to learn here is how to query elements from the DOM and then how to create elements in the DOM, okay? So sometimes we have buttons, as you can see here, we have this button and we want to be able to grab this button, okay? And we want to insert different things in that button. For example, we can insert different HTML. We can insert different text based on who is, you know, logged in. For example, here, if I want to change the text of this input, I have to grab the input first, and then with an event listener, I'm going to change the value of that input, and then I'm going to press a button like submit, then that value is going to be changed. So I'm using DOM manipulation to query elements and then event listeners to listen to changes that the user is making to actually change an element on the screen, if that makes sense. Okay. And then we also have creating elements, okay, in the DOM, which is very important, because if you go, for example, on Twitter, so this is Twitter, right? And what you'll notice here is that as I land here on this page, I have like a feed, right? It's nothing special. But if you only learned HTML and CSS, you know that you come in, you write your div, and you write your button, and you put your text and whatever, and that's how it works. But here with JavaScript, what we do is we take a bunch of data, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and we convert the data into HTML. Okay, so that's why you need to learn this part here, how to create elements and put them in the DOM. Event listeners, clicking, double clicking, resizing the window, connecting to the internet, disconnecting the internet. There are a bunch of events that you can listen to, and you can and you should be researching them. You can look into MDN for those events, but I mean, you are pretty much used to all the events: mouse down, mouse up, key down, key up. You know, there are a bunch of them, and when you start looking at them and reading them on the MDN, Mozilla Developer Network, they'll be making a lot of sense. Okay, and then the next thing that you need to learn is data types, and these last data types are non-primitive. So I'm talking about arrays and objects. Okay, arrays and objects are super powerful. So for example, if I go here on Twitter, this is an array. Okay, an array is a list of things, and this here, it's a list. So whenever you see something like this, your brain should automatically think array. Here, this is another list. This is another list. If I open, let's say, what does FAFU mean? These comments here, this is another array. All right. And then the next important thing that you need to learn are objects. An object is a group of data that represents something. Okay, so for example, this Elon Musk thing here, it's an object. Okay, so it has a profile picture, it has a name, it has a username, it has a verified true, and that object is part of a bigger object, which is the actual post. And the post has a user that posted it, some text, some date posted, amount of retweets, amount of quote tweets, amount of likes, and so on and so forth. And then it has another property called comments, and then inside comments you see all these objects here, because each comment is an object. Okay, so I hope you start to see what I'm talking about, because a lot of people that are studying Udemy and all this stuff, they have like a lot of knowledge, but they don't know how to apply the knowledge, and that's why, you know, they are stuck for so long in tutorial hell. They are not making any progress, and then when they start working with me, they just see data. And then once you understand data, which I'm trying to teach you here, your brain is gonna be, you know, growing. It'll be like a giga brain. So that, and then the next thing that's super important are loops, and more specifically for loops. And another one is the while loop, which I personally almost never used. I would say I used it 0.000000001% in my entire career. It's better to know it than not know it. But with the for loops, I want you to understand what a for loop is doing. So a for loop is pretty much iterating through a list, through an array, or through a string, because strings are just arrays of characters. But that's a discussion for another time. And then with this for loop, we can look at each element from the array, and then we can do specific actions with that array. We can search for things, we can sort an array, we can change the array completely. And then a bunch of people found patterns that they're using all the time. So they've created methods for loops, for arrays, sorry, and they're making our lives easier, right? So one of those methods that I want you to look into is map for each reduce find, filter, index of, I believe these are the most important ones that you should be knowing. Okay, these array methods are the most important ones. But feel free, and in my program, if you work with me, I'm gonna ask you to go on MDN and then reproduce all of them so you can understand all of them, okay? But again, I know you won't be doing that because this is just an entertaining video for you. But if you take action on what I'm telling you, you'll be going on MDN and you'd be researching every single array method and reproducing it so you actually understand how it works. Because if you understand how things work, then you can actually use things. Because if you don't do that, then you'll be just a code monkey. And that's not really productive. But yeah, this is my JavaScript roadmap for 2023. I believe that if you do not know these things, then you have no job learning React, okay? And you know, like a bunch of people jump into React and they have no idea how, you know, how React actually works because they have a very weak foundation in JavaScript. But if you deep dive into this stuff that I'm telling you here, then you'll be able to learn React, and then you'll be able to learn Redux, and then you'll be able to learn other things that are way more complicated. So this is the video for today. I hope you like it. If you want to join the mentorship program, right now it's closed, but you can join the waitlist by clicking the link below. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe. And if you like this video, like it. And if you want to tell me something, comment in the comment section. All right. Peace.